Don, we talked about the idea of the crystal ball looking 5, 10 years ahead into the future. When you think about that, what do you think are some of the big things that leaders in our industry need to prepare for?
AI really becoming embedded in all of our way of delivering services. It's going to come down to, it's going to move away from the model, and it's moving away from the model that we have of maximizing billable hours. It's going to, on the design side, it's going to focus on value-added service, and I'm not breaking any new ground here.
I understand.
But value engineering is going to become a really important, more so than it even is now, and it's been around for a long time. But clients are going to be looking for our expertise. Some of the clients that have massive capital programs are probably going to, with AI, prepare.
What does it take to really grow a civil engineering firm today? What does it take to grow a civil engineering career today? Well, there's one word that I think you'll find can really help you along the way, and that's balance. And in today's episode, I'm honored to speak with Don Benvie. Don is the CEO of Tectonic Engineering Consultants. Don has had an awesome journey from a practicing engineer to founding and leading a multi-office firm in Tectonic. And what he's going to talk about is just a lot of the ins and outs and decisions that need to be made over one's career, whether it's interacting with other people, deciding on services and expansion, and really thinking years into the future. He's going to share how we need to balance things as we grow as civil engineers and as we grow our organizations. It was really a value-packed edition of the Civil Engineering CEO with Don, and I'm so happy that he was able to join us, and I hope that you're going to enjoy everything that he shared. Now, before we dive in with Don, I do want to mention our AEC PM Connect event. This is an event that we've designed for firm leaders who want to elevate project delivery, build strong teams, and scale with confidence. Our next AEC PM Connect event will take place on June 10, 2026 at the Forest Gate Country Club in New Jersey. You can register now at aecpmconnect.com. And at the event, we're also going to have an awesome lunchtime panel where we are going to be featuring some public agency leaders to talk about how project managers in the private and public sectors must collaborate together to build the infrastructure of the future. Again, you can register now at aecpmconnect.com. I'm Anthony Fasano, and this is the Civil Engineering CEO. All right, now I'd like to welcome our guest on to the show for today. Don Benvie is the CEO of Tectonic Engineering Consultants. Don, welcome to the Civil Engineering CEO.
Hi, Anthony. Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here with you.
Yeah, happy to have you, Don. So maybe to start off, you can tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, kind of how you got into the industry and eventually kind of made your way to the CEO role. Take us on your journey, if you would.
Okay. Well, when I started out in college, I actually started out in criminal justice. If it was going to, it's a program at Northeastern University, which is a co-op school, by the way, but it's a program that you go through if you're going to go into either law enforcement or, follow a career into law, move on to law school. And, I started thinking I might want to, become a lawyer, but after the first year, I kind of decided wasn't for me. I always liked math. And then coincidentally, the first summer I worked as a surveyor with a civil engineering firm. I liked it. So I said, well, maybe I'll try it. Maybe I'll switch my major. So I did. And I liked it. I stayed with it, obviously. At Northeastern, you alternate work and school 3 months periods where you're in and out of school. And if you're out, you're usually working for a company. But I ended up working for one of the legacy firms up in Boston, Stone Webster Engineering at the time. I think they've transitioned several times since, but I had a good, it was in my senior year, and I ended up, after I graduated, going to work for them for probably almost 10 years. They were very big into the nuclear industry at the time. So I spent 10 years working on nuclear power plants. I had worked on one project for the Department of Energy where I met my business partner. That job got canceled. I think the Congress decided not to fund it. So continue funding it. So he went back he was working with a design firm at the time, I believe it was Burns and Rowe. And he went back to New York. I went back to Boston. There was an opening that became available down in his company that he was working with. So I went down there for a couple of years, and we decided to strike out on our own and start our own company. So we did it part-time for probably a year and a half, 2 years, and it just obviously you gotta make a decision at some point, so we decided to leave. Our timing was a little bit questionable because the Monday after we had quit our full-time jobs was, if you recall, the Black Monday stock crash in 1987. So the timing was, we were a little bit nervous, but things worked out. We made it through, and we built a company over time. We started out as focusing on geotechnical engineering up here in the Hudson Valley, but it was not enough work to pay the bills, so we broadened out our service, the service we were doing. We got land development work, and so we continued to grow that way. We kind of got tripped into the wireless telecommunications market in the early 90s. When I say tripped into it, one of our employees was working doing maintenance for a big tower owner down in New Jersey, and we were engineers. So I think at the time it was when the Baby Bells and the original, and then they had a second provider in all the markets that the FCC had awarded licenses to start the build out of the cellular phone service. So we got aboard with one of the architects, engineering firms was doing work, and we rode the wave through the 1990s on the wireless, with the wireless wave. It was kind of like the Wild West back then, because everybody, and especially I think it was 1997, where the FCC put out a bunch of digital licenses, and so everybody all the phone companies were up to the races trying to build their systems out. So we grew with that. I think for one point, probably 80 or 90% of our work was cellular phone towers. The one wise thing I think we did was we did take investment, the earnings that we made during that time period, and expanded into the transportation market. We saw, that telco might have a limited time frame. It has that. Obviously now we see that it wasn't limited. We're still here doing it. But we also wanted to get more into the public sector market and get into a more, what I really consider a more stable, larger market. So we made some strategic hires and grew our transportation work. And over the years, I think we've come to realize that the focus that the decision that we made to focus on transportation has paid off for us, and that's helped us to get to where we are today. So I think not in so much of a nutshell, but I think to kind of say how did I end up here? That's really that's probably the fullest story that I can tell.
Yeah, that's great. And a couple things that I'll say, just reflecting on that, myself as a civil engineer, also entrepreneur. I mean, I think that what you can see from Don's story is that, there are definitely opportunities that kind of present themselves in your career, as to whether or not one, takes on those opportunities or not is kind of your decision. But Don obviously, met his business partner, found a connection was there. They ended up kind of planning it out, thinking through things, starting on the side, which I think is a good approach, right? Before you're just going completely all in. But then, like Don says, at some point, you got to make a decision. Are you, in or are you out type of thing? And they obviously did that. And then I think the other piece of that that's interesting is that, you never know what's going to happen in your career. I mean, Don probably had 80 to 90% of their services with the wireless or the telco. And that's probably not even something that they envisioned when they started the company, right?
Not at all.
Which wasn't even available or out there.
Right. Yeah, exactly. We didn't, I don't even think, at least up in the New York market, we had the ability to get, I think they were just coming out with cell phones to install in cars. You had those big units that they installed, or those large bag phones. But that was in 1987. By the way, this is We actually started the company in '86, so we're celebrating our 40th
Oh,
anniversary
wow.
this year.
That's amazing. Congrats. So yeah, so tell us about the company now in terms of about how big you are, locations, like what does the footprint look like at this point?
Right now about 520 people. Tectonic is a multidiscipline civil engineering firm. Where our focus is four core markets that we focus on. That's the transportation, telco, and part of the wireless telco. We also work in the energy market. So we there's some overlap in the types of engineering between the two. So we actually broadened our presence from telco to include the energy and both. And I say the energy, I'm referring to both the public utility market, transmission, distribution, but also the renewables, solar and battery power. Battery powered here recently has been a big opportunity here for us. The third core market is the water resources, and then fourth one is something that it's kind. I don't want to say it's a catch-all, but it's what we call facilities infrastructure. And when I refer to facilities infrastructure, it doesn't matter if it's what type of facility is, whether it's institutional, whether it's a manufacturing or distribution facility or higher education. There's certain services, civil engineering services. Every one of them has to have a geotechnical investigation done. Every site development project has site planning and design, the grade and the drainage. You have the environmental regulatory permitting. So those services, like I say, regardless of what you're building, you're usually going to require those and doing the survey work. So we have that kind of as again, it's not really a catch-all, but it covers, it's broad enough so it really can cover the facilities infrastructure group can cover any type of site development that's required to build. So that's really, those are really the four core markets that we focus on. Now, as far as how we differentiated ourselves, how we differentiate ourselves, I'm going to say that's more along the lines of where we focus our engineering capabilities and services, and that's more so, and that's really on the construction phase of the project. We do design and consulting work, and in our core consulting work, geotechnical, environmental, it's part of the upfront work that needs to get done to get a project designed and approved and get it to the construction phase. But the real, we found that were the opportunities. And again, this goes back when we decided to get into we decided we wanted to try to, penetrate the transportation market at the time, and still more or less the same now. The legacy firms, the engineering firms that designed the original interstate system and who, were really part of the overall build out of the transportation infrastructure, whether it's mass transit or the interstate highway system. Those firms really had a firm toehold into the market. So we saw the opportunity was going to be on the construction services end. And we started to get into it through the QC materials testing and the third-party materials testing and inspection, but we quickly were able to expand into doing more of what we consider the construction management services, the contract administration, resident engineer, and owner's rep. So, and what we've seen as far as where things are now, more firms back during the late 90s when we first started to get into transportation work, where those firms that were more focused on the design side of the work now, saw the opportunities on the construction services side. So the competition has increased, but quite a bit, but we've established our presence and our experience and capability to deliver services. So we still believe we have a great opportunity there, and more so with the Infrastructure Act that was passed a few
Sure.
years ago.
Yeah, that's all
So,
good stuff. Yeah, and I think what you're seeing here as you listen to Don kind of take us through the journey is again, a little bit of the backdrop of growing an AEC firm, right? In that there are decisions to be made, right? That can make or break the sustainability and long-term growth of your company. One of them being Don mentioned their decision to diversify and go into the transportation segment, which obviously proved to be a wise decision. I mean, to diversify the company, which I think is a decision that firms need to make. And then I think another decision that was also interesting and probably important was getting involved in construction. Now you're almost involved in more of the project life cycle too, right? So you could get the
Right.
upfront work and design work, and then you can be involved through the construction of the project, which essentially elongates the amount of work that you can get on one project,
For sure.
right?
That's a real good point, Anthony.
So I
Yeah.
think that these are interesting to hear Don take us through the journey, because what you can see is that if as an AEC firm you want to grow sustainably over the long term, you need to think about these things, right? Are the markets I'm serving now going to be the markets I'm going to serve in 10 years from now? Should I diversify? Are there more parts of a project that I may be able to service, right? Potentially. Or if you deal with some of these mega clients, are there different projects that my big client works on that I may be able to get involved with, right? So I think
100%.
hearing Don take us through this is interesting, because you could think about what founders, partners think about as they're growing an AEC firm. And Don, I want to talk a little bit about your personal journey. We have a lot of listeners that start out as civil engineers. They want to grow their career. They want to become a manager, project manager, maybe eventually an executive, team member at a company. Can you talk a little bit about your journey? Your journey is interesting in that you certainly had growth in your career prior to starting the company, but then when you start a company, you're kind of also becoming an executive like right away, because you're in it.
Right.
You're in it right away. But talk a little bit about your mindset and things that you needed to do as a technical professional by training to now become kind of a leader in an organization.
Well, you made a good point there, Anthony, where I just kind of jumped into this because before we started the company, I was working as a project engineer, as uh, whether it was doing design, geotechnical design work, or out in the field overseeing the construction. I was really not what you would obviously in a role that we would compare to being an executive role. So starting the company just kind of like was, I'm going to say, baptism under fire, so to speak.
Right.
Albeit there was only two of us at the beginning, but over time we had to, we built the company and added people. So I'm going to say that, when you go into an executive role, what you really, I think the biggest mindset that change that you see is how your relationship is developed with your employees. On one hand, I came right out of from my previous employment to working alongside other people, where now I'm in a position, basically jumped into a position where we're overseeing and supervising other people. So I think what it involves is kind of uh, repositioning your uh, reposition your attitude and how you relate to those who you're working with versus who are working at your direction, working for you. And that requires, I shouldn't say there's no requirement, but what I saw was that I had to kind of step back and not look so much at maybe developing a personal relationship where you might, when you're working alongside somebody, eh, eh, you're working along somebody, you develop friendship that uh, may go outside of outside of the work itself. And maybe not, but what I really came to see was I had to kind of step back and realize that I needed to be able to motivate the folks who were working, who I was supervising and directing. Had to really step back and look how to motivate to maximize the effort that they were doing. But the same token, you still have to kind of, it's a balance because you got to have the empathy to realize too that they're in a position where they're reporting to you, that they understand that that you're directing their work, but you as as the employer, in this instance as the business owner, you have to understand that your approach is either gonna motivate them or disincentivize them if you don't
Good.
if you're not aware of what what their capabilities are, who they are I want to say who they are as a person, but
Right.
what drives them. There's a lot of different things, but I think that's the one of the biggest things. The other thing that I realized too was the time horizon had to change. Time horizon was not, I got to get this project done now or next month. I've got to be out, I got to find new work to replace it. So I keep my team going over the next 4 or 5, the next 3, 4, 5 months. Your time horizon becomes a lot longer because you're looking a year, 2 years down the road. What are the things going on in the world or in the country that, what are the trends happening that can affect the business? So you're looking, and where do I need to be? What do I need to be doing to develop the opportunities that we need to keep coming in so that so our pipeline stays full.
Yeah.
So those are probably the two biggest things that I saw that I've experienced and still experience. I mean, it doesn't
Sure.
stop just when you go into the role as you go through your career, as you go through your work, your life cycle, you're still experiencing it.
Yeah. I mean, those are two really good points. I mean, the one that Don makes about, as much as we want to be supportive as leaders, we want to help people, we want to grow people. There is kind of a balance between, right, being a friend of someone and being a
Yeah,
leader and showing someone the way and guiding them. So that's a big one. And I think the last point that Don makes is also really important. I had the chance to talk to a CEO of a company not long ago on the show, and she said something that was along the lines of what you said, Don. She said, "What I try to do is every once in a while lock myself in my office and think 10 years into the future." Right?
exactly.
Like what you're
Yes.
saying, like you have to think about
Right.
what trends are coming because, these executive leadership needs to be really kind of having that 30, 60,000 foot view of understanding what's going on in the industry so that you can kind of set the vision and probably help to make some of the decisions like Don told us earlier, like getting into telecom or getting into something else, right? That's how you figure that out because you're talking to people and you're going to conferences that aren't civil engineering conferences, right? And doing different things to change it up a
Exactly.
little bit. I think that that's something that's really important. In the AEC industry, skilled project managers are the backbone of success. EMI's AEC PM certification offers tailored training, ongoing support, and exclusive access to premium content that keeps your team sharp and effective. From foundational training to advanced leadership tools, set your team apart with certified growth. Learn more at aecpm.com. That's aecpm.com. So, Don, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, I mean, you seem like a pretty measured person, but when you go through a career, when you build a company, there's lots of ups and downs. Like you're dealing with high stakes situations on our projects, complex situations, big budgets, etc. How do you kind of maintain, a measured type composure when you're making decisions and when you're dealing with challenges or difficult situations, knowing that, your whole company is kind of looking at you and kind of feeding off of your energy and how you approach challenging situations? How do you kind of stay collected in those type of situations?
Well, I think probably one of the most important things is that you have a good, strong executive management team that you can really talk to and get their input because there's a lot of value. We don't have all the answers, obviously,
Right.
and having that collaboration provides, and there's, our executive management team here is probably about, I'm going to say somewhere in the vicinity of 12 to 15 people. So there's a lot of diverse opinions and there's a lot of points of view that can give you a broad range of ideas to consider when you're making a decision. And I try to go to the folks who I think have the background in whatever the issue is that, at the moment that has to be, that we're dealing with and trying to determine the best way to approach it, whether it's an issue with a client or whether it's do we open a new office in a certain area or pursue a new market. I look, I look to the executive management team to really get a sanity check on those issues, and especially if it's a high stakes type of uh, concern that we're dealing with. Also, you know, I hate to admit it, but with all the years of experience that I've been doing this, you try to look back to see if there's a similar situation
Yeah.
where we had to deal with it and draw off of, draw off that experience. This is where lessons learned, by the way, becomes very
Oh,
important,
yeah.
and especially documenting it and having some detail if it's turns out, if it's a technical issue or whatever, but having that lessons learned information can really, it can settle you so that you're not second guessing yourself and wondering if you're making, the right determination. And it helps to calm the nerves a little bit too.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think that's great. And that last point, we do a lot of project management training at EMI, and we're always teaching that to PMs at the project level to do a good lessons learned right at the end of your projects. Like, what worked, what didn't work, what can we improve for our next project, and kind of sharing that across your organization, which is really important. And then to Don's point, at the higher level of executive level, the same thing, right? We dealt with a situation like this in the past. We had a client like this, or we lost a job, or we won a job like this in the past, right? Like, what can we glean from that? And I think the first point you made there, Don, is so important about having a good team around you to be able to get information from and collaborate with to make decisions. And really, it's funny. I feel like one of the themes that's been going on with our conversation here is this idea of balance, right? We talked about, balancing between the services you offer, kind of balancing between the relationships with the people that you lead, balancing between making a decision and moving forward quickly, or getting together with your executive team and saying, hey, here's the situation. Let's kick it around a little bit. But I do think that that is important because on one hand, you want to have confidence as a leader. You want to be able to make decisions, but at the same time, like, you don't know everything. Like Don said,
Exactly.
right? We have to always be continuously learning, and that's why there's that value in surrounding yourself with the right team that you can lean
100%.
on, that so you have those complementary strengths that you can really build a great team with around, which is critical, really.
Yeah. I mean, not to sound humble, but I kind of subscribe to the Ronald Reagan theorem where you surround yourself with people smarter than you are.
Yeah, it's a great approach, of course. So, what do you see, Don, as maybe one of the bigger leadership challenges that is facing firms in our industry today in the civil engineering world?
Well, probably hands down is finding the right talent to fit the positions that are preventing us from really maximizing the opportunities that we have. And part of that is obviously due to the I don't want to say loss of interest, but the people, there's a different mindset, I think, with the younger generations as far as where what they see as a challenging career and having to, and looking at what they're going to do over their life as far as how engineering factors into it. And obviously there's just, you have to have the math aptitude and the science aptitude to come into the engineering profession. But with the engineering field. But with that being said, there's just a real dearth of new entrants coming into the engineering profession, and trying to overcome that, I think, is the biggest
Yeah,
difficulty that we have,
yeah,
that by far. I mean, AI may help to address some of that, but it's not a panacea. The AI is not a panacea,
for
and
sure.
in some regards, it could hurt the growth opportunities because with AI to some extent, a lot of the entry type work that a new engineer would do can be done by AI. So it reduces the need of an employer to bring in a younger person to train and cultivate and develop them. And I'm hoping that that's not going to be the ultimate impact of AI. AI has a lot of positive things, but I
Yeah,
think that's kind of a negative aspect of it.
for sure. No, I think that's a really good point related to talent. And I think that I was just talking to an executive on one of our shows, and we were talking about the talent shortage. And one kind of analogy that I always like to use is, if you think about these like sports teams that have these minor league systems where they're developing, right, the talent, and they're bringing up the next level of talent, it's almost like something we need to think about in our field with a great internship program, right? and bringing in people at young ages and developing them and getting them good. Well, you gave me an example of yourself, right? You
Right.
worked with a company with the co-op at Northeastern, and then you ended up
Exactly.
working with that company. So I think as much as AI will be helpful in some ways, and maybe will make some of the existing staff hopefully a little bit more productive in ways, I still think that having a really good pipeline of young professionals, young talent that you can grow, develop your kind of pipeline, if you will, is really going to be critical for firms that want to grow sustainably over the long term, is getting people in young organically and growing it.
Yeah, and there's I'll give credit to the engineering profession as a whole with with the outreach programs that they do, going into the schools, and yeah, I'm talking about school at the middle school level and even younger kids. We participate every year. It's at the end of March. The local high school here in White Plains has a and I forgot what the name of it, but basically, it's for to expose the kids to engineering. We set up a booth there. A lot of other engineering firms will set up a booth there, and they get to see firsthand what what do engineers do. So I think that those type of initiatives are still you just have to keep undertaking. The National Society of Professional Engineers started this a long time ago, and I can remember, we going on Engineers Day, we'd go into the schools
Yeah.
here locally and make presentations to the younger grades to see to kind of hopefully pique their interest. And so I think those are all go along with the initiatives that you're talking about, Anthony.
Absolutely. So, Don, we talked about the idea of the crystal ball looking 5, 10 years ahead into the future. When you think about that, what do you think are some of the big things that leaders in our industry need to prepare for?
Well, I think that it's from a couple of different perspectives. It's the model type of company is going to change. I mean, with the AI really becoming embedded in all of our way of delivering services, it's going to move away from the model, and it's moving away from the model that we have of maximizing billable hours. It's going to On the design side, it's gonna focus on value-added service, and I'm not breaking any new ground
Right.
here,
I
but
understand.
value engineering is gonna become a really important more so than it even is now, and it's been around for a long time, but clients are gonna be looking for our expertise. They're some of the clients that have massive capital programs are probably gonna, with AI, prepare concepts themselves, and then give it to the engineer and say, "Here, you evaluate these concepts and uh, uh, look at the whatever they are, 5 or 10, 15% designs, and tell us which one is the preferred one and why you think it's gonna and why you think it is, and how can and what are what's the way to deliver this project most cost effectively." And our fee gets tied into how much money we save, not how many hours we bill. Likewise, on the construction services side, it's gonna get into, with drones, with video camera and that ability to monitor work that way. We're gonna move way more towards, we're still gonna have to do the contract administration and the oversight that way, but it's gonna focus more on risk management. Our responsibility as a construction manager will focus on the risk management, identifying before they become pitfalls,
Yeah.
what those pitfalls are, how to avoid them, how to resolve any type of conflict resolution. That's also
Yeah.
part of it. So
100%. I mean, I think what you said about the business model is really gonna be the key, right? Because there's not gonna be, like, trading hours for dollars, because if you're getting so much faster with AI and other tools, that's not gonna add up, right? So it's like you said, it's
right.
gonna be very much value-based and output-based, which is something that I know people are talking about, but I think there's gonna be a big shift in that sense going forward.
Yeah. And on the business side, Anthony, how the how it's, how the businesses are organized is going to change. I mean,
Yeah.
you're not going to have that partnership model that's been a bedrock of the profession going back 150 years. You're going to be moving more towards uh, an investor. I'm going to say to some extent an investor type model where you need the capital infusion from whatever it's private equity or from another type of investor to really develop a firm with the talent that's going to be necessary to implement AI, but also meet the complex challenges that we're going to be facing as uh, as our world becomes more densely populated. But again, AI is really going to influence that.
Absolutely. So, last question that I have for you today, if for those leaders listening, if they really want to try to improve, their projects, the delivery of their projects, their project outcomes in their organization, what are some things that they can do to help improve that process?
Well, there's a couple things. I think on the part of what what we as the owners, as the management of the company, I think one of the best things that we can do to give the project managers the tools for them to oversee and deliver their projects is to have fully utilize the capabilities of the ERP
Hmm.
systems that we're using, whatever type of
Yeah.
Deltec or whatever it is, but utilize those capabilities to give them a good dashboard to manage their projects. And when I say dashboard, I'm talking about containing the KPIs that at a glance
Yep.
they can really use to manage their projects. Some of those, some of the KPIs, again, I'm not breaking any ground here, but the ones that we want to always, look ahead on is the utilization, the net revenue multiplier, but more important than the net revenue multiplier is what I think is the revenue factor. The net revenue multiplier, is direct labor, is the net revenue based on the amount of direct labor, but you may not be your utilization may not be that great.
Right.
Your revenue factor, you can't hide it. You can't hide what your utilization is because your revenue factor takes into account your net revenue based on your total labor, indirect and direct. So that's an important KPI. And then remaining budget, AR outstanding. But again, the main point is that they have an easy to use dashboard that they can look at and get an idea at a glance where they are, with their projects. And on from the standpoint, I think it's kind of complementary to that on the project manager side. They should be, when they start a project, have a good work plan in place for themselves, a work plan that really uh, delineates what the budget is, obviously, what their man hours are, what the schedule,
Mm,
and what the deliverables are. So those
yeah.
two things kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, and really the one thing I wanna just reinforce from what you said there is an easy to use
Yes,
dashboard, right?
always.
Because we do, like I said, a lot of PM training and custom programs. When we talk to project managers in organizations like Don's, the one question is, "Hey, we've got this elaborate ERP with all these things, and it's great, but we don't know how to use it. We don't know how to get what we need out of it."
100%. I subscribe to the KISS method, keep it
Yeah, yeah,
simple. So,
right.
but and what's kind of ironic about engineers? Engineers supposedly have a reputation that we figure out how to do things the easy way
Right,
because
right.
but then we end up making these complex reporting systems.
It's
It's like,
crazy.
why are we doing this to ourselves?
Yeah, yeah.
So.
Well, listen, I want to thank again, he is Don Benvie. Don is the CEO of Tectonic Engineering Consultants. Don, I know you're busy, but I want to thank you for taking some time and spending it here with us on the Civil Engineering CEO show. It was great, very informative. I'm really appreciative of your time.
Great. Well, thanks for having me, Anthony. I really appreciate and I'm glad and honored to be able to provide a little bit of insight and hopefully and a little wisdom to help the young project managers who are up and coming who are going to become CEOs themselves one day.
Great, Don. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Don. Really, the word balance kept coming up, right? The idea of balancing how you lead people, balancing what services or markets you get into, right? Balancing ideas about developing teams for the long term versus AI. Just so many decisions that need to be made, and Don gave us some great clarity that hopefully will help you as you grow as a civil engineer or grow your organization. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe to our channel here. We put out videos like this on a weekly basis to help civil engineering professionals become better managers and better leaders. I'll see you next week.